I'm Eileen Roche, editor of Designs and Machine Embroidery magazine, and I'd like to share with you an idea that you can split, or not really split, but use smaller hoops to build big designs. Because a great big hoop doesn't always work well on a finished garment, such as a tubular item like a skirt. But this pretty design is actually made up of 4 different designs. And you can see the templates here. So I have my first design, which I call the anchor design. And then that kind of melds over into number 2, which is the corner design, and the little filigree at the top, number 3, and the small paisley at the bottom. Now, I've stitched these out so you can see the process and what really makes up each individual section. It's always easier to see that when it's done in color. So here I have, this is color 1 and 2 and 3 has been stitched. I guess I have these out of order. And this is color 1 and 2 and then 1. And here you see number 4 has been added. So let's go ahead and hoop for our first design, which is number 1. And I'm going to peel off these templates. Now, you make templates in software. Any embroidery software program that you have, you just go to File and Print. And you can print on regular copy paper like this template, number 1. Or this is a sticky translucent paper that's very helpful for embroidery. But copy paper works fine. If you use copy paper, I suggest cutting around it paper doll style. It gives you an easier visual to use when you're actually hooping. So we'll move over to the ironing board to hoop because, again, this is a tubular item and it's just so much easier to hoop over an ironing board. Now I have fused polymesh stabilizer which is a lightweight cutaway to the wrong side of the embroidery area. And then I'm just centering that design within this hoop. I'm using a flat magnetic hoop because it doesn't stretch or distort the fabric and it just works beautifully for knits. So now we'll take this over to the machine and attach it to the machine. And first I'll nest my skirt up above. And we'll get this all settled when we're over at the machine. So we'll slip it into the machine. And when we do, we have to make sure we get the waistband. I'm feeling to make sure I have both layers of the skirt underneath, the foot and extending back beyond. I don't want anything caught underneath the hoop. And then I'll just hold all of that open. I'm going to go to the design center, and I have in the embroidery section of the machine, and my design is on the USB stick, and it's in the skirt folder. And I'm going to select my first design and touch set. Now, I can change the color of this, and I'm going to go ahead and make that a soft pink. Or maybe a little bit brighter pink so we can see that a little bit better. And then we'll touch OK, and we'll go into embroidery. And now I'm going to use the needle cam. And then, I have to have my presser foot down. And the needle cam allows me to see what the needle sees. So now I can move over my design up so that it matches the crosshair right underneath of it. And since this is my first design, this is close enough. So I'm going to remove that template and begin to stitch the first design. And I have my black thread threaded, and off I go. We'll just start to stitch. Now, this is something that I would normally babysit while I'm stitching because, it has this excess bulk around it. So I just want to make sure that the skirt hem or the waistband doesn't fall into the sewing field. But we'll let this stitch, and when it's done, we'll come back and we'll hoop for design number 2. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it right side out just so we know exactly where to place that template. It's always best to get a nice flat surface to work on. And I'm going to take template number 2 and position this. What I'm focusing on is I can see the satin stem right here, and I want to connect that with the outline on the paisley right here. So we'll finger press that down. And then again, I'm just going to go back to the ironing board and hoop. It's just so much easier over there. I guess I actually want it this way. And position that. Now, you'll notice that that design is fairly close to the hem, and it's a pretty big design. So I'll hold the magnetic top. And that looks pretty good. We can smooth that out. You can lift that frame and make any final adjustments on the fabric right here. And because it's a flat hoop, it won't distort the fiber. So again, we'll nest that. We're going to go back to the machine and retrieve design number 2. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So we'll clear out our first design and select embroidery. And that file is over in our skirt folder on the USB stick. And I'll touch set. And now I most certainly want to change the color of this design into that pink again, because I'm going to use the scan feature, and the scanner will take a photograph of the hoop, and it's going to illuminate this template that's on the screen. And now I want to match my pink design to the template. So we'll go into Move, and I'm just going to use those jog keys to move my design over a little bit. And it looks like I have to rotate it a little bit, so we'll rotate, just a couple degrees. What I'm trying to do is really get those satins aligned, and that is pretty close, I think. Boy, I'm really happy with that placement. So I'll touch OK, and then I'll carefully lift off that template, just slide it off, and we'll lower the presser foot, touch embroidery, and then we'll let it stitch. And as it stitches, this is when we can really make sure that our placement was spot on. So when you use a template, it's always best to print it in a color that's very clear to see. You want to make sure that it's highly contrasting with the fabric and the paper. Even if you're not going to stitch it in that color, it's just helpful to really use color or value as a guide to make it easier for you to place your embroidery. You have to stabilize for knits. You make sure that you always use a cutaway on knit fabric, because you want to stop the stretch behind the embroidery. There's not that much science behind embroidery. It's really a lot of common sense. So we'll just let this stitch, and when it's done, we'll take it out of the hoop and we'll have our finished skirt. We're going to let that design continue to run, but we've already stitched color 1 and it's stitching color 2. So you're going to repeat that same process of using a template and using the scanner if you have it. If you don't have a scanner, then you would just center your needle over the template, that crosshair that's right in the middle. And this, of course, is what the crosshair is, where the lines meet on the template. You want to center your needle right over that. Now, because I use the scanner, you'll notice I also changed the thread color on the screen to pink, because I wanted to align the pink design with the black template that was shown on the screen. So that's why I didn't keep them both in black. You continue that process until you have all four designs complete. And there you have it. I mean, you could do it in 4 different colors like this, or you could stay monochromatic like I did on these samples. Again, notice if you're going to do embroidery, I always go for value. I most certainly want a color that's highly going to contrast with the base fabric. Like on the brown, I used a light gold. And on this green, I used black, because I really want it to pop. After all, you went to all that work. You most certainly want someone to notice your beautiful embroidery. Now, after you do the embroidery, you can, if you used a tear away, you can tear that away. I often like to use a poly mesh cutaway. It's permanent and it's soft next to the skin, so you would leave that in place behind the embroidery. If you have excess cutaway stabilizer, you can go to an iron and reheat this. And when you reheat it, the heat reactivates the adhesive and lets you separate those two layers. And then use pinking shears to trim around the embroidery. And that way you won't have a straight hard line on the skirt as it lays next to your figure. There are so many beautiful embroidery designs out there. You shouldn't be afraid to combine them. Even if you don't have a great big hoop, most certainly use smaller designs in smaller hoops, but connect them in an interesting pattern to make it look like you had a jumbo hoop.